Good day, everybody. My name is Mark DiGiorgio, and I'm with JustFoodERP. Really excited to have everybody with us here. It's my pleasure to introduce Keith Kern to our conversation here today. Keith is with Bruce Foods, one of JustFoodERP's customers. And Bruce, for those of you who may be familiar with their products, are probably more famous for some of the great brands that they represent. I think one of my personal favorites is the Louisiana hot sauce products. Keith, I don't want to do any disservice to either you or Bruce Foods, and I'm wondering, here's a little picture of Keith. Would you be kind enough to give everybody a nickel tour of Bruce Foods and maybe a little bit about yourself?
We're a family-owned company, started in 1928. We do a variety of products, including probably our most famous brand, Louisiana hot sauce. We do a full line of Mexican food products. We do also some canned vegetables. We operate plants in North Carolina, Louisiana, and Texas.
How about a little bit about yourself, Keith?
I've been in IT about 25 years. I started out in banking, stayed there for probably about the first half of my career. I moved over to Bruce Foods in 2000 when everybody was migrating related to the Y2K problem being resolved. And I've been with Bruce Foods ever since. I'm the head of their IT department. We're a relatively small department with approximately 4 individuals.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we've actually got a number of questions for Keith and their experience implementing ERP software. Now, this is a webcast, and we're here to, I guess, exchange a little bit of experience that we have with our various customers and their implementation experience. A little bit about JustFoodERP. We are an ERP provider. We focus on the needs of the food industry, and all that does entail. There's probably about 150, 160 customers running JustFoodERP across, I would hazard, about 300 facilities in North America. Keith, when did Bruce implement with JustFoodERP again? You have to remind me.
We went live in February of 2012, so we just reached we just ended our second year live in Just Foods.
Wonderful. So the format of these webcasts are pretty straightforward. What I'll do is invite Keith to answer a number of questions that we did receive from our registrants. Keith has had these questions in advance, just not to put him on the spot. When I ask Keith these questions in the background, I'll have little slides here of some of the products that Bruce Foods does represent. And once we have the questions that were, I guess, essentially the pre-questions responded to, we will open up the lines for a little bit of an audio Q&A. Again, if you have any questions during the course of our webcast, feel free to use the GoToWebinar console, and I'll make sure I slot them in there as well. So, Keith, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the systems that you were, in fact, running before you decided to evaluate some of the new or a new ERP system.
Okay, we were running a somewhat dated ERP system. It was System 21. It's now owned by Infor. It's gone through a few owners since we acquired it in the early 90s. It was an I-Series-based system. Not specific for the food industry, very, very customized, really customized to the point of not having any update path at any reasonable cost. We had that system tied to multiple warehouses. We had 4 production distribution facilities. Each facility was running their own warehouse management system by Red Prairie. It was very good warehouse management system, but it was tied to a very limited ERP system in the back end. EDI was basically completely custom, written in RPG code, full-time developer staff to keep EDI running.
Great. And so what was the, I guess, catalyst or the instigation that said, enough with the existing system, we need to consider some other options out there?
Well, we were always doing in-house development on the existing system, and we changed our chief operations officer position, and we brought in somebody who had a more progressive mindset. And he was giving us development projects and we just kept getting longer and longer list of outstanding development. We got to the point where the cost of maintaining our existing systems and adding the functionality that we needed was getting to the point where we started thinking, hey, it probably makes sense for us to start thinking about another path, starting over with something that's better suited to the industry we're in. And that's kind of when we started looking at other ERP systems.
Now, there's quite a few vendors out there in ERP land. What are maybe some of the names of the systems that you evaluated before, I guess, making a jump to JustFood?
There are quite a few out there. We looked at, and naturally, because we were running an Infor product, we looked at some of Infor's offerings. We considered some Sage products. We've also looked at Microsoft Dynamics AX and Dynamics NAV, as well as, can't leave out SAP versions tailored for the food industry. We decided early on that what we were going to do was find somebody who knew the food industry, so we wouldn't have to make all the changes on the back end to meet our needs.
Right. Now maybe, and this will actually allow me to kill a couple birds here. We're getting a couple questions that are coming in that I think are trying to gauge the size of Boost Foods' organization. Firstly, how many users do you have running on an ERP system? You mentioned 4 facilities when you guys implemented. The story's changed a little bit there, but how many users were you guys using at Go Live?
Yeah, we have approximately 250 users. Now we're looking at concurrent licensing. So if you look at licensing perspective, it's about 50 concurrent users and 250 total users.
Okay, and there's a question in here around some AP volume and payroll volume. Do you have a sense of a number of AP invoices that you process monthly?
It's in the low thousands.
Okay. And you mentioned 200. How many employees in total?
In total number of employees is roughly 1,000 employees. We have about 250 of which are actually interface with the computer system. The majority of our employees are just line workers that have no interaction with the systems. Right.
Okay, so I think that gives us a good gauge of the scale or size of Boost Foods, and I'm wondering if I can touch back to the selection process. We had a few questions around your selection process. Maybe describe some of the steps that you went through to evaluate the various systems that you had on your list.
The first step was we went through with a list of what our needs were. And we looked at various systems to see if they would meet that criteria. Like the first one was can you handle multiple production facilities? Can you do multiple plants producing the same items at different costs across the facilities? We would drop off based on the broad categories initially. And then once we got to a shorter list, we started bringing in potential vendors to do product demonstrations, which is one of the steps, which is the main step that started separating out JustFoods from the rest of the competitors. Was, from our perspective, JustFoods could come in and not only theoretically tell you how they would solve a problem, but actually sit there and show you on screens how things function.
And how long did that selection process take for you guys?
We spent roughly 18 months going through the selection process.
Right. Okay. So it was a fair amount of due diligence.
Yes. Doing a site, and one of the other things that separated JustFoods out was I was actually invited to attend one of the user conferences where, wasn't just a setup where you're allowed to talk to selected customers that everybody knows you're going to be happy with. I was able to walk around and talk to whatever customers they had that showed up at that conference. So it was a wide range, uncontrolled access. And the general consensus of their customer base was that they were very satisfied.
Very good to hear. So you made a selection ultimately with with us with JustFoodERP. Now the initial driver was to replace the System 21, but tell us a little bit about the decision to replace Red Prairie as well, because you had a run-in warehouse management system across the facilities.
That was probably the hardest part of the implementation. We had a very good warehouse management system. The users were very pleased with it. It was a bit of a sales pitch to convince them to move on to something else. The business decision behind it was largely that it was very expensive to keep supported. It had a very complex interface tying the two systems together. It's really complex when you would need to change something in one system. You would have to map out what effects it would have on the other system. So we figured that the best solution would be to have everything in one system, all data maintained in the same database. Reporting procedures would be a lot easier. Your data validation would be much better. So we decided that with some modifications, the warehousing system within Just Foods could serve the purpose of eliminating the warehouse management system we were currently running.
Right, and you were in our warehouse management system, we call it JF Floor, and you were a pretty early adopter of that product. And what was that experience like, going from a tier one warehouse management system to something? I presume you're only using a small percentage of the Red Prairie capability, but you ended up coming on to a system that was at the time relatively new to our customers, and helped, I guess, in a lot of respects, shape and define how it worked. I'm just curious to know from your perspective what that process was like.
Yeah, basically what we did, we were using a small percentage of what Red Prairie had to offer, probably in the neighborhood of 30%. And not really much chance that we were going to actually move further with it. It's really designed for bigger companies than us. It lengthened our implementation time considerably. We had roughly a 2-year implementation time with over 1 year devoted to us fine-tuning this warehouse management system, to where we got it to the point of when we flipped the switch, we didn't miss any orders. We didn't have any issues in our warehouse that brought anything to a halt. We didn't have any issues with training our users. We probably only spent about 2 weeks dealing with end-user training. We got the warehouse management product we really wanted at a reasonable cost, and all in one system, so you don't have to deal with any of the integration issues.
Right. Now 2 years is a little longer than the average project, and certainly longer than a JustFoodERP sales rep would have told you it would have taken. What were some of the reasons why you had an extended implementation time frame? You touched on one with the warehouse. Anything else stand out?
Really, other than the warehouse management, the only thing we spent a significant amount of time on was doing all of our EDI interfaces. We do the vast majority of our business through EDI, and that took a while to get all of the maps developed for our EDI. But really, the holdup was the warehouse management system. Mm-hmm. Manufacturing side plugged right in, finance, customer services, everything else was pretty much plug-and-play setup other than the warehouse management. And had we not been coming from a Tier 1 warehouse management system, it probably would not have been an issue. But, anytime you try to take something away from a user that a user likes, you're going to have problems. So we had to make sure that we had a very good fit for our warehouse.
Now, you've got a little bit of seasonality, or at the time you had a lot of seasonality in that business. So you had periods of time or months in the year that you're effectively at a shutdown from I guess anything shut down from the perspective of anything other than making products.
Yes, we were a very seasonal business at the time. We were a fourth quarter business, so when it would get to the fourth quarter, we would shut down implementation. We wouldn't work on anything related to the implementation, and then we would pick it back up in January. Now, obviously, you shut down for 3 months. When you pick it back up, there's a few weeks you're going to spend just catching back up to where you were when you shut down.
Now, a question we have in here for you, Keith. How many people did you have working on the project?
On the Bruce Food side, it was limited to basically our department heads, roughly 7 people.
And how much of their week or day would be, because it would be dedicated to the ERP versus their day jobs?
I would say probably, outside of myself, that probably 10%, 10-15% of that time was devoted to dealing with Just Foods. Now, like I said, the vast majority of the time we spent dealing with warehousing. Now, when we were dealing with warehousing, it was just an IT project with IT running out to the warehouse to question, okay, will this process work for you? So it wasn't a whole lot of that time on the warehouse floor devoted to it. It was mostly IT. Well, basically myself doing some of the design work regarding warehouse management.
Right. A couple questions here. I'll ask them are related around your interaction with the JustFoodERP implementation team. So let me ask the first one here. How much hands-on help did Industry Built provide, or was it all on you with a little bit of phone support? Was the first question.
The majority we did through web presentations. We would have the Just Foods implementation team down. Usually in week intervals, they would come in on a Sunday and leave on a Friday. But probably in total, they spent no more than 6 weeks on site.
How has Just Foods helped with product tracking and inventory?
On product tracking, it's been amazing. We have our traceability went down from roughly 20-30 minutes to just 2 or 3 minutes to track down from either direction, either from the finished good all the way back to the components, or you pick a component and run down due to what customers the finished goods were actually shipped to. It's just a matter of a couple of minutes. In our old system, that involved IT intervention because you had to access multiple systems. It was a pretty big hassle. Now it's something done on by our quality department. Quality can do that on queries. It's really easy. As far as like inventory control, it significantly improved our inventory accuracy. Just simply by having everything in one system, you didn't have any interface errors where something happened in the warehouse management system, but it didn't get translated correctly to the ERP system. The visibility is significantly improved in that we are allowed to, if you have user rights, you can see inventory at all of our warehouses. Because in addition to our 4 facilities we had at the time, we have multiple outside warehouses that we keep inventory in, something on the order of 25 to 35 outside warehouses that we keep inventory in.
Very good. Another question here, just around your period setup. Do you run 13 periods or 12 periods?
We run 12. We are on a fiscal year. It's 12 periods.
Okay, great. And the question is this: what would you have done differently? So, effectively, a lot of people are looking for advice on these sorts of projects. And from your perspective, is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight?
The only thing I could think of that we probably should have did was spend a little more. We were pretty focused on keeping our processes the same, so that it would be an easy transition with training end users. We probably, looking back on it, could have spent more time evaluating our processes and changing them, to fit best practices, which is something we're doing now after we did the implementation. But I find the changes are a little bit harder to make once people learn the initial way of doing things in the system. Then you're going back and trying to reteach them.
And what was that change like, moving from System 21 and Red Prairie into the JustFoodERP system? How did the users react to that change?
The Red Prairie system was pretty similar, so it was not a big deal to change. Now, changing from System 21, which was an OI series green screen, to a Windows-based system, that was a significant improvement. Our end-user training dropped dramatically. You can sit down in front of a terminal and kind of have an idea of where you're going with Just Foods without any training. It's a matter of a few hours. You can be fairly efficient at it, whereas when we were using the System 21, we would have to spend days training employees just to get around the system, just to find the menu and the options that they're looking for.
Right. Did you use the NAV WMS solution or another?
Yeah, it's the one that's included in Just Foods.
Yeah, so I'll further that because Keith might not recognize the distinction, not having come from a base NAV environment, but NAV does come with a WMS functionality that extends the WMS to the handhelds, and it uses automated data capture, which is ADCS, which is basically a terminal emulation, character-based user interface to the guns. But JustFoodERP doesn't use that technology. We actually developed our own web services-based WMS functionality, and that is what Bruce Foods uses. So it's proprietary, if you will, to JustFoodERP, and has I guess the NAV functionality out of the box only has, I think, 3 or 4 functions, and I think ours is around 15 functions or something like that now, including some pretty important ones for food companies. So Colin, hopefully that addresses your question there. David had a question in here for you, Keith. Did Industry Built Suggest provide best practice designs, or did they lead you towards using your existing structure in the new JF system?
They do provide best practices. We're an 80-year-old company, and it's relatively hard to change some of our practices. But Just Foods does suggest the best practices. They also, to their credit, when you want to change something and they don't agree with the change, they'll make the argument, I don't think you should do this. And in some cases, we listened to them. In some cases, we didn't. But that was refreshing to me, because my experience in the past dealing with software companies is they'll modify the software any way you want it, as long as you're paying the bill. Whereas Just Foods was a little different in that they were resistant to changing processes that they really felt were the best.
Great. So, David, I hope it addresses the question for you. Joanne had a question here. What is your current inventory accounting method for valuing inventory? What are some of the reports you use to generate with JustFood?
I'm not sure I completely understand that question.
So here, let me try to, sorry, just go back to it here for a sec. How do you guys do costing today? What is your costing method?
Okay, we're using standard costing.
Okay. And from a costing perspective, was there anything that you were able to do with JustFood that you didn't have access to before?
No, it's pretty similar costing method. I think the only improvement we have with regards to costing is we're doing a better job of tracking actual consumption on the floor. Mm-hmm. So I think our costing is significantly more accurate than it was before. JBA System 21 was used back flushing method. You'd basically periodically go back and check when you were way off on inventory, but you never really you were never exactly right on any given production batch on what your consumption was, whereas in Just Foods now we are.
That must have been a big change in itself in terms of the level of information you had to capture in production. What was that like?
Yes, it's significantly improved. As far as on the production side, you can see what you're actually using versus what your theoretical consumptions were. A bit on the reporting side of it, because it's so easy to do, we have a lot of custom-made reports using a variety of tools, from the simplest being Microsoft Access to some SQL databases that's pulling data out of the system. just to get it in the format that we are accustomed to seeing it in.
And I presume, I guess, going to actual consumption and production, I gave you a bit clearer picture on item trace as well?
Yes. Yeah, drastically changed item traceability comparison between us now and the before.
Was there any resistance with your production staff around having to capture that much information in more or less real time?
There was some resistance to having to capture that much data, but you could justify it easily with they were no longer fighting to keep inventory levels accurate. They knew what they were consuming, so they knew what they had to have on the shop floor.
Are you guys still doing physicals for the sake of keeping inventory accurate, or is it just for audit or other accounting reasons?
We're doing it for auditing purposes.
And how frequently do you do physical?
We do once a year.
Okay. What were you doing before?
They were constantly auditing inventory, constantly going out and counting, especially in the small items that you would tend to run out of, like caps or labels.
From Christina, do you use JustFoodERP for your forecasting?
Yes, we do. We're using it. Well, you can probably explain this a little better than I can. We're using ForecastX. It's an export from Just Foods into an Excel add-on.
Yeah, it's an affordable demand planner.
yeah, that's
pretty affordable tool, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little piece of functionality. I'll just elaborate really fast. It's dragging these guys out of Excel is they're kicking and screaming. So we actually have a little tool that works as an Excel plugin, and basically it sucks out your history. So in this case, if we're talking about demand, your sales history, allows you to manipulate your forecast using a variety of algorithms, including a best fit algorithm. It chooses an algorithm based on accuracy of past forecasts. And then once you get a number you're comfortable with, after you massage it, you can basically stick it back into the system and use that forecast for the planning engine, or what we call planning worksheet. So I presume that's kind of what you guys are doing then?
Yes.
Another question here from Joseph. When WMS transactions, in particular receiving, occur, are these transactions immediately automatically processed in JustFoods, or do they require user intervention?
No, it occurs in real time. When you receive it, it's received.
All right, great. Adam had a question here. Are you certified by either BRC or SQF?
We are SQF certified.
Okay. So the second half of that question is, if so, how has JustFood facilitated, improved, made compliance easier?
Well, simplest answer is traceability. Traceability went down from, like I said, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, down to somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. Significantly improved. You can keep all your auditing. We're not completely done with it yet, but you can keep all your audit records within Just Foods. We're in the process now of migrating from a paper-based quality control to quality control within Just Foods.
Yeah, that seems to be pretty common with all of our customers. The quality department's usually the last to give up on the paper.
Yeah, sometimes they like to be a Flat Earth Society member.
Yeah. But given their function, I think that makes sense. So.
Yes.
Another one here from Joseph. Are you using Just Foods for CRM, marketing, and sales functions? Excuse me.
We are not using a CRM package at this point. We are using it. All of our marketing information and reporting comes out of Just Foods, as well as our brokerage and commission structures done within Just Foods.
How big is your direct sales force?
We have approximately 25 regional managers and a variety of brokers under them.
Okay. Just reading a question here from David. Do you enter in all transfers of inventory between facilities, or for production consumption purposes, do you take from one location?
We do transfer orders between locations. For production consumption, it typically is done within the one location. If there's a component like, for example, a hot sauce, the mash is made in El Paso and then it's shipped to Louisiana to be consumed in the production of hot sauce. It's a transfer order, and it's in storage in the Louisiana facility until it's made into hot sauce. So the consumption's actually done in Louisiana.
Do you do country of origin?
Yes, we do.
Okay. That's a question from David as well. Question here from Janelle. Can bill of lading be generated for transfers when you move goods to and fro?
Yes, we have a bill of lading for every transfer.
Okay. Let me ask you actually just tell me a little bit about the multi-location nature of your business. You mentioned at the very top that you've got common products across facilities that have different costing. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you support that in a system?
Okay, our situation has changed a little bit since we implemented and that we have sold our Bruce's Yams division. But at implementation time, we had the Yam division, which operated 2 facilities that were practically identical. They produced the same items, but they had different cost of production between the production facilities, which was a challenge in our older system. We also, when we went live, because we had all facilities using the same ERP system, we had to go live at the same time in all 4 facilities.
Yeah, some of our customers who are multi-facility have the luxury of turning them on in sequence, but you didn't quite have that luxury, did you?
I did not have that luxury. That would have been a nice to have, but it really, going live wasn't a big event. It wasn't as big as anybody expected. In fact, our CEO made the comment that was the quietest ERP implementation he had ever seen.
No, you were recognized, were you not? And I got a terribly boastful guy.
I received a President's Award from our CEO, basically for having a quiet implementation.
For not burning down the business, huh?
Yeah, he was like, nobody's knocking on my door on day one, so he's like, let it wait a couple of days, and still no one's complaining.
I think we've nailed a lot of the questions that did. Maybe there's another one here. I think there might have been one more that came in. There were a couple more that came in advance. I think the only one that we haven't addressed, because I paraphrased a couple of them because they're very similar to one another, and we've covered off some of that content. But there's one here that is just asking about volumes. So in this case, I'm just going to read it verbatim, and you can comment. We have over 100,000 SKUs. Have you experienced any issues with reports and/or excessive processing time? And sorry, the rest of the question got cut off for me, but I think we get the gist of it there. So I'll leave it at that first, and there's a couple more I think that came from the same person. You're not quite 100,000 SKUs, though, are you?
I'm not quite 100,000 SKUs. I'm fewer than 5,000. We don't see any lag time with reporting, but if we're looking at historical information, we're pulling it off a report service, which basically has a couple of different ways you can do it. But I'm somewhat reluctant to pull huge reports out of a live ERP system, just because you can produce performance issues if you ask them for a huge amount of information. But the key to it is what your hardware is. That your hardware can support whatever volume of transactions you're running. We have no issues with it.
Yeah, certainly the best practice, especially with a higher volume environment, is to suck out all your transactional data and stick it out into a flattened cube or data warehouse on a different server, preferably, and beat that server up for reporting and not pick on the transactional server, because of how SQL works, a query will lock a record on you, so you can't have, in theory, somebody query for a report and transact simultaneously. So the only way around that is to have a super speedy server or solid state disk or a whole bunch of hardware, but the best way to do it is definitely through data warehouse, which you guys are implementing now, right?
Yeah, we are. I have two methods right now. One, I'm doing just a DTS package that takes the production database and dumps it over to a backup server, and we use that information for primarily our accounting group, but a variety of people use that to access with Microsoft Access. We have a few people that can do their own reports, and we allow them to drill into the database. They can't mess anything up. It's a backup copy. The more promising tool that we're still developing is BI4NAV, which is it's data cubes. The performance is phenomenal when you compare it to Microsoft Access. Mm-hmm. It does output in Excel, which everybody's familiar with. But as I say, the only part we have completely working on data cubes right now is the sales reporting. We're in the process of moving manufacturing and other modules into that environment.
Very good, very good. There was, in fact, a question somewhat related to that a little earlier, and it was around the amount of history you maintain. So you're a couple years live on the system. How many years do you of history do you plan to maintain in your live database?
We have 2 right now. We're going to keep at least 7.
Okay. Quick one around sales order process. How are customer orders taken? Do you have an order desk that enters orders into JustFood, or do you have an e-commerce or via mobile tablets?
The vast majority of our orders come in through EDI. We do have, well, you can either call in or fax in orders to our customer service department, and they would enter the manual.
So you're not a tremendously high volume order environment?
Not in the manual entry. We're not tremendously high. Like I said, the bulk of it comes in EDI. It's completely automated.
Mm-hmm. A question in here around which version of JustFood you're using and which client. So are you using Classic Client for report creation or another package? And then question here about the newest release, 2013 R2, whether or not you've migrated to it.
We have not migrated yet to 2013 R2. It's in planning stages. We're still using Classic Client. Now we do not have the client installed on each desktop. The way we're managing it is we have the client installed as a web app on a couple of terminal services boxes in the corporate office, and they access it remotely.
All right, and for reporting, are you guys writing reports in native Nav Seaside, or are you guys using other report writers?
We're doing other report writers. Like I said, the majority, for historical purposes, we don't want to hit our production database, so we hit these backup servers or reporting servers. We don't hit directly into the production database. In fact, that's one of the changes we've made in migrating to Nav is reporting has moved from the IT department over to the accounting and finance group. It's just a lot simpler of a process than it once was.
So you don't need any development or coding kind of skills to do that kind of work anymore?
No, it's pretty understandable. Once in a while they'll have an issue that they can't figure out how to do something, that they'll come to IT, but the vast majority of their reports are now done in accounting.
Very good. I just had two questions for you, or 3. Let me ask you 3. In general, what do you think the impact to the organization's been with the move to JustFoodERP?
It's been a significant improvement. We not only did we get an improvement in our performance initially, but we're on a sustainable path. Most food industry companies are facing the same issues. By having a system that's dedicated to the food industry, when some new regulation or demand gets introduced, JustFoods is going to be the ones developing it, as opposed to having your internal staff have to figure it out on their own.
Okay, the next question I have for you, I guess, Keith, is in hindsight, these things, your memory fades in time, of course, and not to take anything away from your big effort on the implementation. But the question I have for you, and this is my question, so it's a little loaded. But the question is this: was it worth it? And looking back, would you have made the same decision again?
Definitely. I have no regrets on what we did. The implementation was a very positive move for the company. We have a really good relationship with Just Foods. Really, pretty much everything's on the positive side.
All right. Keith, let me ask you this. What does the future hold for Bruce? You guys went through a little bit of change recently, but maybe tell us a little bit about that. It is public domain kind of stuff, and what's the future look like with respect to the ERP system?
Yeah, we're currently looking at moving into implementing, I believe you guys call it the plant module. It's more technology in the actual production area itself versus the floor, where if the floor was, in our world anyway, was completely mobile devices. We're also, we're doing some development in the data cubes, BI for NAV, where more of our reports will come out of data cubes versus Microsoft Access. We're moving further into quality. There's a lot going on right now. Like I mentioned before, we're kind of going, now that we've been in the system 2 years, we're going back and looking at our processes more and saying, okay, can we do something better now than what we've initially chosen?
Now, there's a little bit of an upgrade as well available to you guys with a new looking product, the NAV 2013 R2 product for JustFoodERP. Is that on your horizons at all?
Yes, it is. That's going to be coming down the road for us. We have a lot of modified menus, so that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge than the typical upgrade has been for us. But I really like it. It's just a matter of it's just taking the time and dedicated to implementing it.
Right. One from David again. What does doing reporting and accounting mean exactly, and how does accounting actually produce right custom reports, and with what program?
Typically, they do it in Microsoft Access. It's ODBC connection into the database. They know what tables to go after. The tables are named in English. The fields are pretty self-explanatory versus having a developer devote his time to writing these custom reports. It's more of a self-service type environment. Right.
And I'll further that as well. Yeah, we work with our customers work with a number of Microsoft tools. The big ones. They're pushing on the Power BI suite now, and pivot tables are pretty common. Excel is pretty common. Some of our customers are using an add-on for Excel that simplifies some of the queries back to the database and preserve some little nuances that are in the system. But our customers in general use a variety of tools, and it's an embarrassment of riches, I think, to the point where it's sometimes confusing for customers to figure out which tool to use because there's so many available from a reporting standpoint. But I guess that's the advantage and disadvantage of a Microsoft platform. You get options.
Power Pivot's very popular. It's a free add-on. If anybody's not familiar with it, it's a free add-on for Microsoft Excel.
Yeah. And this last question is the money question. I think it's the one that's on the minds of anybody who's going forward with a project. And I think you've addressed half the question already. And I'm going to paraphrase the question and have you ask it a different way or answer it a different way as well. But the question that actually came from Adam was your project on time and on budget?
The timeline grew when we decided we were going to eliminate our warehouse management system and go with strictly a Just Foods platform. So our timeline did grow. Budget-wise, we were within the margin of error on the budget. So.
Yeah, the on time definitely. I think going in, you had a shorter a time horizon that was much shorter than it actually was. So I think it would be probably a red mark on that one. We bet again. Yeah, we blew away the timeline when we decided to build a warehouse management system, basically. Mm-hmm. Now that it's up for interpretation of how long it took to do that.
to me, as somebody on the technical side, taking a year to do that much development is a very short period of time.
Yeah.
The coding was very accurate when it was delivered.
Yeah, and to help explain that a little bit, this is a few years ago now, obviously, but Bruce was the one of the early customers on JF Floor, which is our integrated warehouse management system. So the one that basically moved customers away from the one that came from Microsoft Dynamics NAV onto basically the platform that our customers have now. So Bruce was an early beta customer for that. And then he also helped us develop out the containerization I guess license plate functionality is probably another way to describe it that most people would be familiar with that functionality. But we call it containerization, and you guys helped us shape that. So it took some time to, when you guys made a decision to get off Red Prairie onto our functionality, it took some time to develop some of that out.
Yeah, in fact, our Chief Operations Officer at the time was referring to it as a Red Prairie Light.
Right. All right. I'll take that. It's a Tier 1 system, so
yes.
It's certainly, yeah, it's certainly more affordable for our average size customer and easier to run. All right. So I think just with our time allowance here, I think we were kind of committing around 45 minutes, and I think we scheduled about an hour, so we're going to be coming up on that momentarily. On behalf of Keith, I want to thank everybody for attending. If you're interested in more information about JustFoodERP, we're easy to reach, email, web, toll-free number. Keith was generous to extend his contact information to everybody as well. So if you want to reach Keith, feel free to give us a contact or a call, or contact us how you wish, and we'd be happy to forward along an introduction. Some of the things that might be useful for folks, there is actually a case study on Bruce Foods. It's available for download from our website. We also have a white paper on managing the multi-site facility. I'd be more than happy to demonstrate a product over the web for anybody who's interested in getting what we call a tickler or buy-in demo, just to give you a kind of an overview of what JustFoodERP is all about. But probably most importantly, and Jenna would not forgive me if I didn't remind everybody to complete our online survey, which is going to come to you by email tomorrow. With that survey email, you will be provided access to a recorded version of this webcast in case there's any colleagues who are interested in learning a little bit more about Bruce Foods' experience with JustFoodERP. And I will point out that if you complete the survey, we will be happy to send you some Bruce Foods product, compliments of JustFoodERP. So I guess with that, Keith, I want to thank you tremendously for helping us in the last hour. And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time today. Hope you have a great day.